stairs couldn't shake the feeling that Hawkins was holding its breath. He stood at the corner of Maple and Cornwallis, staring at the house that used to belong to the Holloway family. Half of it had collapsed during what everyone was calling the earthquake. The other half stood there like a broken tooth, windows dark, front door hanging open. Someone had spray painted an X on the door frame. Condemned. The National Guard had been through 3 days ago. They'd marked all the damaged buildings, told people which streets were safe and which weren't. Most families had already left. The ones who stayed moved carefully, like they were walking on ice that might crack at any moment. Will's mom said they were staying. She'd said it with that look on her face, the one that meant she'd already decided and nothing would change her mind. Jonathan had just nodded. He understood. Hawkins was home. Even when home was breaking, a warm breeze pushed through the street, carrying dust and the smell of rain that hadn't fallen yet. Will pulled his jacket tighter anyway. He'd been cold since they got back. Not the kind of cold that came from weather. The other kind. The kind that lived under his skin. He heard footsteps behind him and turned. Mike was crossing the street, hands shoved in his pockets, that worried crease between his eyebrows that had been there for weeks now. "Your mom's looking for you," Mike said when he got close enough. "I know." "She's worried." "I know." Mike stopped next to him and looked at the Holloway house. Neither of them said anything for a while. They'd gotten good at that. At standing next to each other without needing to fill the silence with words. "Dustin's at the basement," Mike said finally. "He's got some new theory about the gates. Something about residual energy patterns." Will nodded but didn't move. "Elle's there too," Mike added, quieter now. "She's tired, but she wanted to see everyone." That got Will's attention. He looked at Mike. "Is she okay?" "She says she is." Mike's jaw tightened. "But she's not sleeping much, and sometimes she just stares at nothing, like she's listening to something." Will knew that look. He'd worn it himself often enough. They started walking toward the Wheeler house. The streets were emptier than they should have been for a Thursday afternoon. A few cars rolled past, packed with suitcases and boxes, leaving. The ones who could afford to anyway. "Mike," Will said, and then stopped. Mike waited. Will tried to find the right words. How do you explain a feeling? How do you tell someone that the air tastes different, that everything looks slightly wrong, like you're seeing it through water? "It feels heavy here," Will said finally, "like the town is infected," Mike finished. Will nodded. That was close enough. They cut through the Clarksons' backyard. Mrs. Clarkson was loading boxes into her station wagon. She saw them and waved, but her smile was tight. Scared. Everyone wore that same expression now. Fear dressed up as normal. "Will," Mike said as they reached his backyard. He stopped at the edge of the grass, one hand on the fence. "Do you feel... is it still..." He didn't finish the question, but Will understood what he was asking. Is the Upside Down still there? Is it still watching? "I don't know," Will said honestly. "It's not the same. It doesn't feel the same." "Different how?" Will tried to put it into words. The Upside Down had always felt cold, alien, like something that wanted to consume everything warm and living. This new feeling was... He didn't have a word for it. It was almost warm, almost familiar, but wrong in a way that made his stomach hurt. "It doesn't feel angry," Will said slowly. "It feels curious." Mike frowned. "Curious?" Before Will could answer, the basement door swung open and Dustin's head poked out. "Finally," Dustin called up. I've been waiting for like an hour. Get down here. They climbed down the basement stairs. The familiar smell hit Will immediately. Old carpet, Mike's dad's cologne from the box of winter clothes in the corner, the faint chemical tang of the mimeograph machine Mrs. Wheeler sometimes brought down from the school. 11 sat on the couch, her legs tucked under her. She looked thin, too thin. Her eyes had dark circles under them that makeup couldn't quite hide. But she smiled when she saw Will, and that made some of the coldness in his chest ease up a little. "Hi," she said. "Hi, Elle." Lucas was sprawled in the beanbag chair, tossing a basketball up and catching it. Nancy sat at the table with Robin. Both of them bent over a map of Hawkins that was covered in colored pins and marker lines. "Okay," Dustin said, standing in the middle of the room like a teacher about to start class. "So I've been thinking about the gate situation." "Shocking," Lucas muttered. Dustin ignored him. "The gates are closed, we know that. Elle closed them. But here's the thing. When you rip a hole in fabric and then sew it shut, the fabric is still weaker at that point, right?" "Oh no," Robin said. "He's doing the fabric metaphor again." "It's a good metaphor," Dustin insisted. "My point is, just because the gates are closed doesn't mean reality is stable here. Think of Hawkins as a piece of cloth that's been poked full of holes and then patched up. It's not as strong as it used to be." Will felt something twist in his gut. The curious feeling. The wrongness. "So what does that mean?" Mike asked. Dustin spread his hands. "It means Hawkins is vulnerable. It means bad things can still get in," 11 said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. She wasn't looking at any of them. Her eyes were focused on something in the middle distance, something no one else could see. "Elle?" Mike moved to sit next to her on the couch. "What do you mean?" "I don't know." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "But something is here. Not from there. From somewhere else." Will's hands went cold. "You feel it too." It wasn't a question. 11 turned to look at him. And in her eyes, Will saw the same confusion he felt. The same creeping dread. "It's not angry," 11 said, echoing his words from earlier, "but it's not good." Nancy stood up from the table. "Wait, you're saying there's something in Hawkins? Something that's not from the upside down?" "I think so," 11 said. "What kind of something?" Lucas asked. 11 opened her mouth to answer, then closed it. She looked frustrated. Will understood. "How do you describe something you've never encountered before? How do you name something that doesn't fit into any category you know?" "I don't know what it is," 11 said finally, "but it's watching us, and it's waiting." The basement went quiet. Outside, Will could hear a car engine starting. More people leaving. Getting out while they still could. "Well," Dustin said, his voice determinedly cheerful, "that's not ominous at all." Nobody laughed. Will stood by the small basement window, looking out at the darkening street. The sun was setting behind the trees, painting everything in shades of orange and shadow. For just a moment, he thought he saw something move in the storm drain across the street. Something pale, something that might have been a hand. He blinked and it was gone, but the wrongness remained. The feeling that Hawkins was holding its breath, waiting for something to exhale. Will turned away from the window. The others were talking, making plans, trying to figure out what to do next. But Will couldn't shake the image of that pale hand, or the feeling that somewhere in the shadows of Hawkins, something was smiling, and it knew his name. Nancy Wheeler had been a reporter long enough to know the difference between a story people wanted to tell and a story they needed to bury. The Hawkins police station smelled like burnt coffee and old paper. Chief Powell sat behind his desk, his face drawn. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in the past month. Maybe he had. Hawkins had a way of doing that to people. I can't give you details, Nancy, Powell said. His voice was tired. The family doesn't want media attention. Nancy kept her notepad in her lap, pen ready. She'd learned not to take notes too obviously. It made people nervous. A 12-year-old boy goes missing and you're not asking for help finding him? We're handling it internally, like you handled everything else. Powell's jaw tightened. Nancy felt a flicker of guilt, but she pushed it down. Eddie Flint had been missing for 18 hours. 18 hours in a town that had been torn apart by interdimensional monsters. 18 hours was a lifetime. Chief, I'm not trying to make this harder, Nancy said, softer now. But people are scared. They deserve to know what's happening. Powell rubbed his face with both hands. When he looked up, Nancy saw something in his eyes that made her stomach drop. Fear. Real bone-deep fear. Between you and me? Powell leaned forward. I don't know what's happening. The kid was playing in his yard. His mom went inside to get lemonade. 2 minutes. When she came back, he was gone. No signs of struggle? Nothing. No footprints, no disturbed grass. It's like he just... Powell made a gesture with his hands, like something disappearing into air. Vanished. Nancy wrote that down. She couldn't help it. There's something else, Powell said quietly. His little sister. She was playing with him before he disappeared. She says Eddie was talking to someone. Who? She doesn't know. She couldn't see anyone. She just heard Eddie laughing and talking, like he was having a conversation. Powell paused. She said he kept looking at the storm drain by their driveway. Nancy's pen stopped moving. The drain, she repeated. Powell nodded. I know how it sounds, but that's what she said. Eddie walked over to it, got down on his hands and knees, and started talking to someone inside. Then he just crawled in. The air in the office felt too thick. Nancy forced herself to keep breathing normally. A 12-year-old boy crawled into a storm drain. That's what his sister says. She ran to get their mom. By the time they came back, he was gone. Powell stood up, walking to the window. We searched the sewer system. Nothing, no sign of him. Nancy thought about the things she'd seen in the past few years. The Upside Down, the Demogorgon, Vecna. Each time they'd thought it was over. Each time they'd been wrong. Does Hopper know about this? I called him this morning. He's going to take a look around the neighborhood. Powell turned back to face her. Nancy, if this is what I think it is... It's not, Nancy said quickly. Too quickly. The gates are closed. Elle closed them. Then where's Eddie Flint? Nancy didn't have an answer for that. She left the station and drove straight to the Flint house. It was a small ranch-style home on the east side of town near the woods. Yellow tape marked off the yard. But there were no officers stationed outside. The department was too understaffed for that. Nancy parked across the street and sat there for a moment thinking. A boy talking to someone in a drain. A boy who crawled inside and disappeared. It didn't match Vecna's pattern. Vecna killed in the open, made a spectacle of it. This was quiet, hidden, different. She got out of the car and walked toward the house. She wasn't sure what she was looking for. Evidence, maybe. Or just confirmation that something was wrong. More wrong than it already was. The storm drain sat at the end of the driveway, a dark mouth in the concrete. Nancy crouched down next to it, careful not to touch anything. She pulled her flashlight from her bag and shone it inside. The beam of light caught water, rust, and shadow. Nothing else. Just an ordinary drain. Except Nancy leaned closer. There was something caught on the grating. Something red. She reached in carefully and pulled it free. A balloon. Deflated now, but still recognizable. The kind you'd get at a birthday party or a carnival. She turned it over in her hands. There was no string attached. No knot. Just a balloon that had somehow ended up in a storm drain where a boy had disappeared. "Can I help you?" Nancy jumped. A woman stood on the porch of the Flint house. Mid-30s. Blonde hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. Her eyes were red from crying. "Mrs. Flint," Nancy said, standing up quickly. "I'm Nancy Wheeler. I'm so sorry about Eddie. You're that reporter." Mrs. Flint's voice was flat. "Chief Powell said you'd probably come by. I'm trying to help." "Are you?" Mrs. Flint walked down the steps, stopping at the edge of the driveway. "Because it seems like everyone's trying to help, but my son is still missing." Nancy held up the balloon. "I found this in the drain." Mrs. Flint stared at it. Her face went pale. "Eddie loves balloons," she said quietly. "Ever since he was little, but we didn't have any balloons yesterday. I would have noticed." "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." Mrs. Flint wrapped her arms around herself. "My daughter Amy," she told the police Eddie was talking to someone. She said he was laughing, like whoever it was telling him jokes. "Did Amy see who it was?" "No." She said she tried to look, but every time she got close, Eddie would move between her and the drain, like he was blocking her view. Mrs. Flint's voice cracked. "What kind of person hides in a sewer and talks to children?" Nancy didn't answer. She was thinking about the balloon, about Eddie crawling into the dark, about how 12-year-old boys didn't just disappear into storm drains unless something convinced them it was safe. "Mrs. Flint, did Eddie say anything? Anything about who he was talking to?" The woman hesitated. "Amy said Eddie called them nice. Said they knew his name." She looked at Nancy with desperate eyes. "How would someone in a drain know my son's name?" Nancy felt cold spread through her chest. It was the same cold she'd felt in the Creel house, the same cold that came right before everything went to hell. "I don't know," Nancy said, "but I'm going to find out." She drove back toward town as the sun started to set. The balloon sat on her passenger seat, a deflated red thing that shouldn't mean anything but somehow meant everything. At a stoplight, she pulled out her walkie-talkie. "Mike, you there?" Static, then Mike's voice. "Yeah, I'm here." "Get everyone together, your basement, tonight." "Nancy, what's wrong?" She looked at the balloon again. In the fading light, it almost looked like it was moving, breathing. "I don't know yet," Nancy said, "but something's taking kids, and it's not from the upside down." She clicked off the walkie before Mike could respond. The light turned green. Nancy drove through the intersection, past the elementary school, past the arcade, past all the familiar places that made up Hawkins. Somewhere in the growing darkness, in the network of drains and sewers beneath the town, something was waiting. Something that knew children's names. Something that used balloons and kind words to lure them into the dark. Nancy gripped the steering wheel tighter. Whatever it was, they'd faced worse. They'd survived the upside down. They'd beaten Vecna. They could handle this. She almost believed it. The Wheeler basement felt smaller with everyone packed into it. Mike stood by the stairs, arms crossed, watching Nancy pin photos to the corkboard she'd brought down from her room. Eddie Flint's school picture. A map of the east side drainage system. The deflated red balloon in a plastic bag. Dustin sat at the table with a stack of books about Hawkins' infrastructure. Lucas was on the floor tossing that basketball again, the rhythmic thump filling the silences. Robin perched on the arm of the couch, one leg bouncing nervously. Steve leaned against the wall near the small window, his bat propped beside him like he might need it any second. Eleven sat very still on the couch, her hands folded in her lap. Mike could see the tension in her shoulders. She'd barely spoken since Nancy had shown them the balloon. "Okay," Nancy said, stepping back from the board. "Eddie Flint, 12 years old. Disappeared from his front yard yesterday evening around 6:30. His sister Amy says he was talking to someone in the storm drain. She couldn't see who. Eddie crawled in voluntarily. Police searched the sewers. Found nothing. And you found that." Lucas pointed at the balloon with his chin, still tossing the ball. "It was caught in the grating. Mrs. Flint says they didn't have any balloons at their house, so someone put it there," Robin said. "Or something," Steve added quietly. Nancy nodded. "Chief Powell is scared. I could see it. This doesn't fit any pattern we've seen before." Mike felt his stomach tighten. They'd had a month. 1 month where things had been almost normal. Or as normal as Hawkins ever got. He should have known it wouldn't last. "It's Vecna," Lucas said, catching the ball and holding it. "Has to be. He's still out there. We wounded him, but we didn't kill him." "No." Eleven's voice was soft but certain. Everyone turned to look at her. "Not Vecna." "Elle, how can you be sure?" Mike moved to sit beside her. She closed her eyes, like she was reaching for something far away. "I can feel him in the upside down. He's hurt. Angry. But he's not moving, not yet." "Then what took Eddie Flint?" Nancy asked. Eleven opened her eyes. They looked darker somehow, shadowed with exhaustion Mike recognized all too well. Something else. Something that doesn't belong here. Dustin leaned forward, his hands pressed flat on the table. "Okay, but that's not very specific. We need to narrow this down. Is it from the upside down? A different dimension? Some kind of residual energy from the gates?" "I don't think it's from there," Will said. Mike hadn't noticed him sitting in the corner by the basement's far shelf. Will had been so quiet, almost invisible. Now everyone was looking at him. "What do you mean?" Nancy asked. Will stood up slowly, like he was trying to find the right words as he moved. "The upside down has a feeling. It's cold, alien, like ice in your veins. This..." He gestured vaguely at nothing. "This is different." "Different how?" Robin asked. "Warmer. Older." Will stopped in the middle of the basement, his arms wrapped around himself. "When I'm near the upside down, I feel sick. My neck tingles, my skin gets cold. But this thing, whatever it is, it doesn't feel like that." "Then, what does it feel like?" Mike heard the edge in his own voice and tried to soften it. "Will, we need details." Will looked at him, and Mike saw fear there. The same fear Will had carried ever since 1983. The fear of being believed. "It feels like it's smiling," Will said quietly. The basement went silent. Even the furnace seemed to stop humming. "Smiling," Lucas repeated. "I know how it sounds." Will's hands clenched into fists. "But that's what it is. The upside down wants to consume us. It's hungry and angry, and it hates everything warm. This thing, it's not angry, it's patient. It's waiting for something." "Waiting for what?" Steve asked. "I don't know. But it's not trying to tear through reality like the Mind Flayer did. It's already here, and it's..." Will trailed off. "What?" Nancy prompted gently. "It's playing with us." Dustin stood up abruptly, startling everyone. "Okay, this is officially above my pay grade. We're talking about an entity that's not from the upside down, that can lure children into storm drains, and that apparently has a sense of humor. He pulled at his hair. We need more information. We need to know what we're dealing with. We need Hopper, Steve said. Hopper's checking the woods near the Flint house, Nancy said. I told him what I found. Mike turned to 11. She was staring at her hands, her forehead creased with concentration. He recognized that look. She was searching, trying to find something in that dark space behind her eyes where she could see things the rest of them couldn't. Elle, he said softly, what are you looking for? The boy, Eddie. Her voice sounded distant. I'm trying to find him. Can you see him? 11's eyes squeezed shut tighter. A thin line of blood appeared under her nose. Mike reached for her hand, and she gripped it hard enough to hurt. There's water, 11 whispered. Dark, he's scared. He's calling for his mom. Where is he? Nancy moved closer, urgent but trying not to push too hard. Elle, can you see where? Underground. Deep. But it's not. 11's eyes snapped open. The blood from her nose dripped onto her shirt. It's not the upside down. It's here, our world. But wrong. Wrong how? Dustin pressed. 11 let go of Mike's hand and wiped her nose. Her hands were shaking. Like a space between. A place that shouldn't exist but does. She looked up at Nancy. He's still alive. But something is keeping him there. What something? Lucas asked. I couldn't see. Every time I got close, everything went dark, like something was blocking me. 11's voice hardened. Something that knew I was looking. The furnace kicked back on with a rattle that made everyone jump. Steve grabbed his bat reflexively, then lowered it with an embarrassed shrug. Robin laughed nervously. Okay, so we're all a little on edge. We need a plan, Nancy said, moving back to the board. If Eddie's still alive, we need to find him before... Before what? Mike interrupted. We don't even know what we're dealing with. We can't make a plan if we don't know what we're fighting. So we figure it out, Nancy shot back. That's what we do. We investigate, we plan, we execute. And sometimes people die, Mike said. The words came out harsher than he meant them to. Nancy's face tightened. Mike knew she was thinking about Barb, about Eddie Munson, about everyone they'd lost along the way. We're not losing anyone else, Nancy said firmly. You can't promise that. Mike, 11's voice cut through the tension. Stop. Mike bit back whatever he was going to say next. 11 was right. Fighting with Nancy wouldn't help Eddie Flint. I'm sorry, he said, quieter now. We barely survived last time. And now there's something new and we don't understand it and we'll figure it out. Dustin interrupted. That's what we do. We're the party. We fought demogorgons and mind flayers and human monster hybrids. We can handle one kid-stealing drain dweller. Is that what we're calling it? Robin asked. Drain dweller? I'm open to suggestions. How about we focus on finding Eddie first, Lucas said, and worry about naming the thing later. Will moved back to the corner, that faraway look on his face again. Mike watched him, worry gnawing at his gut. Will always felt these things first, always knew when something was coming. Will, Mike said, you okay? Will didn't answer for a moment, then very quietly, it's listening. Everyone froze. What? Nancy breathed. Right now, it's listening to us. Will's eyes were wide. It knows we're talking about it, and it thinks it's funny. The temperature in the basement seemed to drop. Mike moved instinctively to stand between Will and the small window. As if that would help. As if any of them could stop something that lived in the spaces between. How do you know? Steve asked, his hand tight on the bat. I can feel it. Will's voice was barely audible. The way it feels when someone's watching you, but bigger, older. He looked at 11. It knows about you. It's been watching you since you got back." 11 stood up slowly. Her face had gone pale, but her jaw was set. Mike knew that look too. Determination. The face she wore before she fought. "Let it watch," 11 said. "We've dealt with worse." But even as she said it, Mike heard the uncertainty in her voice. And he knew. They all knew. This was different. This was something they'd never faced before. And somewhere in the dark beneath Hawkins, in the tunnels and drains and forgotten spaces, something was smiling, because it had all the time in the world. And they were just beginning to be afraid. Tommy Chen was 9 years old, and he knew he wasn't supposed to be out after dark. But his bike chain had broken 3 blocks from home, and by the time he'd walked it back, pushing the stupid thing with its clicking wheel, the sun had already set. His mom was going to kill him. She'd been worried ever since the earthquake, ever since Eddie Flint went missing. Tommy walked faster, the broken bike rattling beside him. The streetlights flickered on one by one, casting long shadows across the empty road. Most of the houses on this street were dark. The Petersons had moved to Indianapolis. The Chens next door, no relation, had left for Chicago last week. Half the neighborhood was gone now. The wind picked up, pushing leaves across the pavement. Tommy shivered. It wasn't that cold, but something about the empty street made his skin prickle. He was passing the old library parking lot when he heard it. A laugh. Not mean, not scary, just someone laughing, like they'd heard a really good joke. Tommy stopped. The bike wheel clicked once more and then went silent. "Hello?" His voice sounded too small in the empty street. Another laugh. Closer this time. Coming from the storm drain at the edge of the parking lot, Tommy knew he should keep walking. His mom always said not to talk to strangers, especially not strangers who hung around in weird places. But the laugh wasn't scary. It sounded friendly, like someone who wanted to share the joke. He left his bike on the sidewalk and walked toward the drain. The grating was old, covered in rust and dead leaves. Water trickled somewhere below, echoing in the darkness. Tommy crouched down, trying to see inside. "Hello?" he said again. "Hello, Tommy." Tommy jerked backward, almost falling. The voice had come from inside the drain. A man's voice, soft and kind. "How do you know my name?" Tommy's heart was beating fast now. "Oh, I know lots of things." The voice sounded amused. "I know you broke your bike chain racing Marcus Weaver. I know you're going to be in trouble when you get home. I know you're scared." Tommy swallowed hard. He should run. He should grab his bike and run all the way home and never look back. But he didn't. "Who are you?" he asked instead. "I'm a friend." There was a pause. "Would you like to see something amazing?" "What kind of amazing?" "The best kind. The kind that makes you forget about broken bikes and angry mothers and empty streets." Tommy leaned closer to the grating. He still couldn't see anyone, just darkness and the faint shimmer of water. "I can't see you," Tommy said. "That's okay. You don't need to see me to know I'm real." The voice was gentle, patient. "Tommy, do you like balloons?" "I guess. I have one down here, red, your favorite color." Tommy's breath caught. Red was his favorite color. How did this person know that? "How did you—" "I told you, I know things." The voice moved, like whoever it was had shifted positions in the water below. "Would you like it? The balloon?" Tommy knew this was wrong. Everything about this was wrong. People didn't sit in storm drains. People didn't give balloons to kids they couldn't see. People didn't know your favorite color unless you told them. But the voice was so nice, so friendly, and Tommy was tired of being scared all the time. "Okay," he heard himself say. "Wonderful." The voice sounded genuinely pleased. "But you'll have to come a little closer. I can't quite reach the grating." Tommy lay down on his stomach, pressing his face close to the rusted bars. The smell hit him. Wet concrete, old water, something else underneath. Something that made his stomach turn. "I don't think," Tommy started, and then he saw it, a pale hand reaching up through the darkness. The fingers were long and white, impossibly white, like they'd never seen sunlight. They held a red balloon, the string wrapped around the wrist. "Take it," the voice said softly. "It's yours." Tommy reached through the grating. His fingers brushed the string. The hand moved faster than anything Tommy had ever seen. It grabbed his wrist, and the grip was cold. So cold, it burned. "Let go!" Tommy tried to pull back, but the hand held firm. "Shh." The voice wasn't nice anymore. It was still soft, still patient. But there was something underneath it now. Something vast and hungry. "Don't you want to float, Tommy?" "Down here, we all float." Tommy opened his mouth to scream. "Hey!" The shout came from across the parking lot. Tommy twisted his head and saw a figure running toward him. Tall, an adult. The hand let go so suddenly Tommy rolled backward, gasping. He scrambled to his feet, his whole body shaking. The figure reached him. It was Mr. Henderson, Dustin's mom's friend. He worked at the radio tower. Tommy had seen him around the neighborhood. "You okay, kid?" Mr. Henderson grabbed Tommy's shoulders, looking him over. "What are you doing out here?" Tommy couldn't speak. He pointed at the drain with a shaking hand. Mr. Henderson looked at the grating, then back at Tommy. "Did someone try to grab you?" Tommy nodded. Mr. Henderson pulled a flashlight from his belt and shone it into the drain. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating rust and water and concrete. Nothing else. No hand. No balloon. No one. "There's nobody down there," Mr. Henderson said slowly. "There was." Tommy's voice came out as a whisper. "He was talking to me. He knew my name." Mr. Henderson's face went serious. "What did he look like?" "I couldn't see him, just his hand. It was really white, and he had a balloon." "A balloon? A red one?" Mr. Henderson clicked off his flashlight. When he looked at Tommy again, his expression had changed. He looked scared now. Really scared. "Come on," Mr. Henderson said. "I'm taking you home, and you're going to tell your mom exactly what happened. Then we're calling the police." They walked back to where Tommy's bike lay on the sidewalk. Mr. Henderson picked it up like it weighed nothing, carrying it in one hand while keeping the other on Tommy's shoulder. Like he thought Tommy might run, or like he was making sure Tommy stayed close. Tommy kept looking back at the drain. The street light above it flickered, throwing shadows across the grating. For just a moment, Tommy thought he saw something move in those shadows. Something that might have been a face, a pale face with a smile too wide to be human. Then the light steadied and there was nothing. "Don't look back," Mr. Henderson said quietly. "Just keep walking." They walked in silence for a block. Then Tommy spoke, his voice barely audible. "Mr. Henderson?" "Yeah?" He said, "We all float down there. What does that mean?" Mr. Henderson didn't answer for a long time. When he finally did, his voice was tight. "I don't know, kid, but I'm going to find out." They turned onto Tommy's street. Lights were on in almost every window. Tommy's mom was standing on the porch, her phone pressed to her ear. She saw them and started running. Tommy let her hug him, let her cry into his hair, let her ask 100 questions he couldn't answer. But the whole time he kept thinking about that hand, that impossibly white hand reaching up from the dark, and the voice, so kind, so patient, so hungry. Mr. Henderson stayed while Tommy's mom called the police. Stayed while Tommy told his story 3 times to 3 different officers who didn't quite believe him. Stayed until Chief Powell himself showed up, his face grave. Tommy heard them talking in low voices by the front door. Heard Mr. Henderson say something about Eddie Flint. Heard Powell's response, sharp and worried. "That makes 2. Two what? Tommy's mom asked, coming over. Powell exchanged a glance with Mr. Henderson. Two kids who say someone in a storm drain tried to grab them. Eddie Flint. Now your son. But you searched the sewers, Tommy's mom said. You said there was nobody down there. There wasn't. Powell rubbed his face, but that doesn't mean there isn't now. Tommy sat on the couch, wrapped in a blanket his mom had insisted on, even though he wasn't cold. Not on the outside anyway. Inside he felt frozen. That hand had been so cold. And the voice, Tommy, he looked up. Mr. Henderson had crouched down in front of him. I need you to think really carefully, Mr. Henderson said. Did the person in the drain say anything else? Anything at all? Tommy thought about it. Remembered that soft voice floating up from the darkness. He said he was a friend, Tommy whispered. He said he knew things about me and what? He laughed. Before I got there. I heard him laughing like he thought something was really funny. Tommy met Mr. Henderson's eyes. But I don't think he was laughing at a joke. I think he was laughing at us. Mr. Henderson's jaw tightened. He stood up and pulled out a walkie-talkie. Dustin, you there? Static, then Dustin's voice. Yeah, what's up? Get everyone to Mike's basement, right now. We're already here, what's wrong? Mr. Henderson glanced at Tommy, then walked toward the kitchen, lowering his voice. But Tommy could still hear him. He tried again. Tried to take another kid. We need to do something before... The walkie crackled, cutting off the rest. Tommy pulled the blanket tighter and stared at the window. In the reflection, he could see his own scared face staring back. And for just a second before he blinked, he thought he saw something else in the glass. A pale face with dark eyes and a smile that went too wide. Then it was gone. But Tommy knew it was still there. Somewhere in the tunnels beneath Hawkins, waiting in the water in the dark, waiting for the next time someone got too close to a storm drain, waiting to pull them down where they all float. 11 couldn't sleep. She lay in bed at Hopper's cabin, staring at the ceiling. The room was dark, except for the small nightlight Mike had given her. It cast soft shadows across the walls, making everything look unfamiliar, even though she'd lived here for months. 3 a.m., the worst time. The time when everything felt heavier. She closed her eyes and tried to find that quiet space inside herself. The void, the place where she could see things others couldn't. But every time she reached for it, something pushed back. Not violently, not like the Mind Flayer's rage or Vecna's crushing hatred. This was different, gentle, almost playful, like someone tapping on glass to get her attention. 11 sat up, her heart racing. The nightlight flickered once, twice, then steadied. She wasn't alone in the cabin. Hopper was asleep in his room down the hall. She could hear his familiar snoring through the walls, but that wasn't what she felt. There was something else. Something watching from a place she couldn't quite reach. 11 swung her legs out of bed and padded to the window. The forest outside was dark, trees swaying in the wind. Nothing moved. Nothing she could see anyway. She pressed her hand against the cold glass. I know you're there, she whispered. The nightlight went out. 11 froze. She waited for her eyes to adjust. But the darkness was complete. Absolute. Like someone had pulled a blanket over the world. Then she heard it. A laugh. Distant. Echoing from somewhere that wasn't quite here. 11's breath caught. She knew that sound. Not personally, but she recognized the feeling underneath it. The same feeling she'd gotten from Tommy Chen when Nancy had brought him to the basement earlier. The boy had been terrified, but under his fear was something else. Confusion, because the thing that had tried to take him had been nice. The laugh came again, closer now. 11 closed her eyes and reached out with her mind. Not forcefully, not like when she fought, This was softer, searching. The void opened around her. Black water, infinite darkness. Usually she could see everything from here. People, places, the threads that connected them. But now the darkness seemed thicker, heavier, like moving through mud. She pushed forward anyway, and then she saw it. Not a shape. Not exactly. More like an absence of shape. A space where something should be but wasn't. And from that space, lights moved. Strange lights. Colors that didn't have names. 11 reached toward them. The lights scattered, reforming into something she almost recognized. A figure, tall, white, smiling. "Hello, Jane?" The voice came from everywhere and nowhere. It sounded kind, curious, like meeting an old friend. 11's blood went cold. Nobody called her Jane except Hopper, and only when he was serious. "Who are you?" she asked into the void. "Oh, I think you know what I am, even if you don't have words for it." The figure moved closer but stayed just out of focus. "You're very strong. Stronger than most. Stronger than the other one." "Other one?" "The angry boy. The one who thinks he's a god." The voice sounded amused. "Henry, 1. Vecna." So many names for such a small thing. 11's hands clenched into fists. "He's not small. He killed people, hurt people. So have you." The words hit harder than any physical blow. 11 felt her concentration waver. The void rippled. "I didn't mean," she started. "I know." The voice was gentle again, understanding. "That's what makes you interesting. You hurt people because you had to, not because you wanted to. That's very human of you, Jane." "Don't call me that." "Why not? It's your name, your true name, before they gave you a number and made you into a weapon." 11 tried to push back, to force the presence away. But it was like pushing against water. It moved around her efforts, reforming instantly. "You can't hurt me, little one," the voice said. "Not here. Not in this place between places." A pause. "But I'm not trying to hurt you either. I'm just curious." "About what?" "About what you are. What you can do. You're not like the others. Not quite human, not quite something else." The figure tilted its head, though 11 still couldn't make out features. "You've touched the other side, seen things that would break normal minds. And yet here you are, still fighting, still hoping." "I'm not afraid of you." The laugh came again, not mean, just genuinely entertained. "Oh, Jane, I don't want you to be afraid. Fear is for the others, the simple ones, the ones who taste better when they're terrified." The voice dropped lower. "You're different. You're a puzzle. And I do love puzzles." 11 felt pressure building behind her eyes. Her nose began to bleed, warm drops hitting the void's dark water. "Why are you here?" she demanded. "What do you want?" "Want?" The figure seemed to consider this. "I want what I've always wanted, to exist, to feed, to be." It moved again, circling her now. "Your town broke reality, Jane. All those gates you opened, all that tearing and stitching and tearing again. You made the walls thin, and when walls get thin, things slip through. You're from outside." 11 understood now. Not the upside down, somewhere else. "Very good. Yes. I'm from the space between spaces. The dark outside, your dark, and your lovely little town called to me." The voice sounded almost fond. "So much fear here, so much trauma. It's like a feast laid out just for me." 11's head throbbed. Blood ran down her chin now. She was pushing too hard, staying in the void too long. But she needed to understand. The children, Eddie, Tommy, you're taking them? Taking? The figure paused. No, Jane. I'm teaching them to float. There's a difference. What does that mean? It means the void shattered. 11 gasped, her eyes flying open. She was back in her room. The nightlight was on again. Everything looked normal, but her nose was bleeding heavily, soaking into her nightshirt, and her head felt like someone had driven nails through it. The door burst open. Hopper stood there in his pajamas, his gun in one hand. "Elle, I heard." He saw the blood and rushed over. "Jesus, kid, what happened?" 11 couldn't speak for a moment. The pain was too intense. Hopper grabbed tissues from the nightstand, helping her tilt her head forward. "I saw it," 11 managed finally. "The thing taking children." Hopper's face went serious. "Where?" "Not where. What?" 11 looked up at him, blood still dripping. "It's not from here. Not from the upside down. It's from outside everything." "Outside?" "The space between worlds, where things that shouldn't exist wait for walls to break." 11 wiped her nose with shaking hands. "We made the walls break, Hopper. We let it in." Hopper sat down heavily on the bed. "Can you fight it?" 11 thought about that presence in the void. The way it had moved around her powers like water. The way it had known her real name. The way it had been curious instead of afraid. "I don't know," she admitted. "It's not like anything I've faced before. It doesn't want to kill me. It wants to understand me." "Is that better or worse?" "I don't know that either." They sat in silence for a moment. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. "It called me Jane," 11 said quietly. Hopper's jaw tightened. "How does it know that name?" "It knows everything. It sees things." 11 looked at her hands. They were still shaking. "It knows about Vecna. Called him small. Said he was just an angry boy. And what does that make this thing?" 11 met Hopper's eyes. She saw her own fear reflected there. "Something bigger," she whispered. "Something older. Something that thinks we're toys." Hopper pulled her into a hug. 11 let herself be held. Let herself feel small and scared for just a moment. Because she was scared. More scared than she'd been facing the Demogorgon or the Mind Flayer or even Vecna. Those things had wanted to kill her. Wanted to destroy everything. This thing just wanted to play. And somehow that was worse. When Hopper finally let go, he looked at her seriously. "We need to tell the others. Tomorrow, all of them." 11 nodded. "Mike needs to know. Everyone needs to know." Hopper stood up, still holding his gun. "You think you can sleep?" 11 looked at the window. The darkness outside seemed deeper now. Fuller. "No," she said honestly. Hopper nodded. "Me neither. Come on, I'll make coffee. Screw sleep." They walked to the kitchen together. Hopper put on a pot of coffee that smelled burnt and terrible. 11 sat at the table, wrapped in a blanket. The nightlight in her room flickered one more time, and somewhere in the space between spaces, something ancient smiled, because the puzzle was getting more interesting, and it had all the time in the world to solve it. Dustin had always believed that knowledge was power. If you understood how something worked, you could predict it, control it, beat it. That's how they'd survived the Demogorgon, the Mind Flayer, Vecna. They'd learned the patterns, found the weaknesses, exploited them. But this thing didn't follow patterns he recognized. He sat at the Wheeler basement table, surrounded by papers. Reports from Chief Powell about the missing children. Notes from Nancy's interviews. Will's drawings of what he felt. 11's description of the void encounter. None of it made sense. "Okay, let's go through this again," Dustin said, tapping his pencil against the table. Eddie Flint. disappeared 3 days ago. Witnesses say he was talking to someone in a drain. Someone who knew his name. Lucas leaned back in the beanbag chair. Tommy Chen, almost taken last night. Same thing, voice in the drain. Knew his name. Offered him a balloon. But here's where it gets weird, Robin said, from her spot on the floor. Papers spread around her. Tommy's description doesn't match Eddie's sister's description. Mike looked up from where he sat next to 11 on the couch. What do you mean? Amy Flint said the voice was high. Young. Like a kid their age. Robin shuffled through her notes. But Tommy Chen said it was an adult. Male. Soft voice. So there's 2 of them? Steve asked from his position by the stairs. Or it changes, Will said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. He sat in his usual corner, sketchbook open on his lap. He'd been drawing while they talked, his pencil moving across the paper in quick, nervous strokes. Changes how? Nancy asked. Will held up the sketchbook. He'd drawn 2 faces, both pale, both smiling. But one looked younger, friendlier. The other looked older, more knowing. It adapts, Will said, to whatever makes the target comfortable. Eddie liked kids his own age, so it sounded like a kid. Tommy responds better to adults, so it sounded like an adult. Dustin felt his stomach drop. That's not good. No, Will agreed, it's really not good. But if it changes voice, what else changes? Lucas sat up straighter. Appearance? Form? Elle said it didn't have a fixed shape in the void, Mike said, his hand finding 11's. Just lights, colors. 11 nodded slowly. It showed me a shape. But I don't think it was real. I think it was what I expected to see. So we're dealing with a shapeshifter, Robin said. Great. Those are always fun. Not just a shapeshifter, Dustin corrected. A telepathic shapeshifter that can read what scares you and become it. He dropped his pencil. We're so screwed. We've faced worse, Steve said, but he didn't sound convinced. The basement door opened. Hopper came down the stairs, his face grim. Joyce Byers followed him, then Jonathan. They looked like they hadn't slept. We've got another one, Hopper said without preamble. The room went silent. Another missing kid? Nancy asked. No. Hopper pulled out his radio. Another incident. Girl named Sarah Park, 12 years old. She was walking home from a friend's house when something approached her near the playground. What happened? Mike demanded. She ran, smart kid, but she saw it. Hopper looked at Will. She described it as a clown. Will's pencil stopped moving. A clown, Lucas repeated flatly. White face, red hair, colorful costume. Hopper read from his notepad. She said it was standing by the merry-go-round, just watching her. When she started to run, it waved, like it was saying goodbye. Did it chase her? Steve gripped his bat tighter. No, just watched. Let her go. Hopper closed the notebook. But here's the thing. Sarah Park, she's terrified of clowns, has been since she was 5. Saw one at a birthday party and had a panic attack. The pieces clicked together in Dustin's mind like tumblers in a lock. It's learning, he said slowly. Not just adapting to each kid. It's learning what scares people in general. Learning from what? Robin asked. From us. From Hawkins. Dustin stood up, moving to the map of town they'd tacked to the wall. Think about it. Eddie was taken first. It was still figuring things out. Just a voice. Generic comfort words. Tommy was second, more refined. Specific details about Tommy's life. Now Sarah, it's not even trying to lure her. It's just presenting itself as her worst fear. Why? Joyce spoke for the first time. Her voice was quiet but steady. If it wants to take children, why reveal itself? Why not stay hidden, Because it's not just feeding on fear, Will said. His voice was distant again. Elsewhere. It's cultivating it, making it stronger. Eleven's grip on Mike's hand tightened. It said fear tastes better when it's stronger. It talked to you? Joyce moved closer to the couch. Maternal instinct overriding everything else, in the void. Last night, 11 looked at her hands. It wasn't trying to hurt me, just studying me. Like a scientist with a lab rat, Robin muttered. So what's the plan? Steve asked. Because I'm assuming we're not just going to sit here while this thing terrorizes kids. We need to understand it first, Nancy said, but she sounded uncertain. Figure out what it wants, where it came from. I know where it came from. 11's voice was barely audible. I told Hopper. It's from outside, from the space between worlds. We let it in when we broke reality. The weight of those words settled over the basement like a blanket. So this is our fault, Mike said. Not a question. An accusation aimed at no one and everyone. We didn't know, Joyce said firmly. We were trying to save people. And we did save people, Hopper added. But we also tore holes in things that maybe should have stayed closed. Dustin looked at the map again. Red pins marked where each incident had occurred. The Flint house, the library parking lot, the playground. They formed a rough triangle around the center of town. It's moving inward, Dustin said, starting at the edges, working toward the middle. Toward what? Lucas asked. Dustin put his finger on the center of the map. Downtown Hawkins, the old theater, the abandoned mall, the network of storm drains that connected everything underground. Toward the heart of town, Dustin said. It's establishing territory. Then we take the territory back, Steve said simply. How? Mike challenged. Elle can't fight it. It just moves around her powers. Then we don't fight it with powers, Nancy said. She was looking at Will's drawings again. We fight it with what it doesn't expect. Which is? Robin prompted. Nancy was quiet for a moment, then, we'll figure it out. We always do. But Dustin heard the uncertainty in her voice. They all did. Will closed his sketchbook. There's something else. Something I haven't told you yet. Everyone waited. When it shows itself, Will said slowly. When it takes a form people can see, it's not just their fear. It's their fear mixed with something else. Something from its world. That's why the shapes are wrong. Wrong how? Jonathan asked. Too pale. Too smooth. Like masks. Will met their eyes. Sarah said the clown had a smile that didn't move right. Like it was painted on. That's because it was. The thing underneath doesn't have a face we'd recognize. So it's making one, but it doesn't quite understand how faces work. That's horrifying, Robin said. Yeah, Will agreed. And it's getting better at it. The more it watches us, the more it learns. Eventually it won't look wrong anymore. It'll look perfect. And then what? Mike asked. Then it won't need to hide in drains, Will said. It'll walk among us, and we won't know until it's too late. The basement went silent again. Upstairs, they could hear Mrs. Wheeler moving around the kitchen. Normal sounds. Normal life continuing while they talked about things that shouldn't exist. Dustin sat back down at the table. His head hurt. Too much information, not enough pattern. He liked patterns. Patterns meant solutions, but this thing didn't follow patterns. It created them. We need to find Eddie, 11 said suddenly. He's still alive. I could feel him. If we find him, maybe he can tell us something useful. The sewers, Hopper said. Powell searched them, but not thoroughly. Not with the right equipment. We're going down there? Steve sounded resigned. Of course we are. We always end up in the worst places. Not tonight, Hopper said firmly. Tonight we plan. We get proper gear, we coordinate with Powell. He looked at each of them in turn. And nobody goes anywhere alone, understand? This thing picks off isolated targets. Don't make it easy. They all nodded, but Dustin saw the look that passed between Mike and 11. The same look they got before they did something stupid and brave. They were going to try to fight it anyway, because that's what they did, that's what the party did. They fought monsters. Even when the monsters were learning to be human, even when the monsters were smiling, Mike had been in worse places. He'd been in the Upside Down. He'd walked through tunnels full of vines that wanted to strangle him. He'd faced demogorgons and mind flayers and seen his best friend possessed by something that wanted to end the world. But somehow this felt worse. The sewer tunnel stretched ahead of them. The flashlight beams, cutting through darkness, that seemed to eat the light. Water trickled somewhere in the distance, echoing off concrete walls covered in rust and something else. Something that might have been mold, or might have been something worse. "This is a terrible idea," Steve muttered from the front of their group. He held his bat in one hand, flashlight in the other. "Just wanted that on record." "Noted," Nancy said from behind him. She had her own flashlight and a canister of pepper spray that Hopper had given her. Like that would help against something that lived in between dimensions. Mike walked in the middle, keeping close to 11. She looked pale in the flashlight glow, her hand tight in his. He could feel her trembling. Or maybe he was the one trembling. Hard to tell anymore. Lucas brought up the rear with Dustin, both of them armed with flashlights and Dustin's backpack full of supplies they probably wouldn't need, but felt better having. According to the map, Dustin said, his voice echoing strangely, "We should hit a junction in about 50 feet. The main drain from the east side connects there. That's where Eddie would have ended up if he crawled into that storm drain. If he's still down here," Lucas added quietly. Nobody responded to that. They were all thinking it, but saying it out loud would make it too real. The tunnel opened into a larger chamber. Their flashlights revealed a space about 20 feet across, with 3 other tunnels branching off. Water pooled in the center, black and still. The smell hit Mike harder here. Wet concrete, rust, and underneath it all, something sweet and rotten. "Split up?" Steve suggested, then immediately shook his head. "No, bad idea. Horror movie rules. We don't split up." "Agreed," Nancy said. She moved to the edge of the water, shining her light into each tunnel. "We checked them one at a time." 11 pulled her hand free from Mike's and moved toward the water. She stared at it like she was seeing something the rest of them couldn't. "Elle?" Mike moved beside her. "What is it?" He was here. Her voice was barely audible over the dripping water. "Eddie, he was here." "How do you know?" 11 touched her temple. "I can feel the fear. It soaked into everything." She looked up at Mike, her eyes reflecting the flashlight. He was so scared. "Was?" Lucas caught the past tense. "Is," 11 corrected quickly. "Is scared he's still alive." Mike wanted to believe her. He did believe her. But something about this place made belief feel fragile. Like the darkness was pressing in, trying to crush the hope out of them. "Which tunnel?" Nancy asked. 11 pointed to the leftmost passage. It was smaller than the others, barely 4 feet high. They'd have to crouch to get through. "Of course," Steve muttered. "It's always the creepy small one." They moved toward it. Steve went first, his bat scraping against the tunnel walls. The sound set Mike's teeth on edge. Everything set his teeth on edge down here. The tunnel curved, then opened into another chamber. This one was different. The walls weren't just wet. They were covered in something. Mike shined his light closer and immediately wished he hadn't. Drawings. Crude, childish drawings scratched into the concrete. Stick figures. Houses. Balloons. And in the center, a figure with a too wide smile. "What the hell?" Lucas breathed. "Eddie," Dustin said. He pointed to the corner where the name Eddie was carved in shaky letters. He was here. He was trying to leave a message. Nancy moved to examine the drawings. "These are recent. The concrete dust is still fresh. So where is he?" Steve spun in a slow circle, his flashlight sweeping the chamber. "Eddie, can you hear me?" His voice echoed down the tunnels, bouncing back at them from multiple directions. Eddie, 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 growing fainter each time until it faded into nothing. And then from somewhere deep in the tunnels, something laughed. Mike's blood went cold. That sound, that soft, amused laugh. "Please tell me you all heard that," Lucas said. "We heard it," Nancy confirmed. Her hand had moved to the pepper spray. Eleven's nose started bleeding, just a trickle, but Mike saw it immediately. "Elle, don't," he said. "Don't use your powers down here." "I have to," she whispered. "I have to know where it is." "We know where it is. It's here, everywhere." Mike grabbed her shoulders. "Save your strength. We might need it to get out." The laugh came again, closer now. From the tunnel on their right, Steve raised his bat. "Okay, new plan. We get out of here. Now." "But Eddie," Nancy started, "is probably dead," Steve said bluntly. "And I don't want to join him. Move." They turned back toward the entrance tunnel. But the darkness there seemed different now. Thicker. And in that thickness, something moved. A pale hand emerged from the shadows, gripping the edge of the tunnel opening. Then another hand. Then a face, white as paper, eyes too dark. A smile that stretched too wide, showing teeth that looked sharp even in the dim light. "Hello, friends," it said in a voice like silk over broken glass. Mike pushed 11 behind him. Steve stepped forward with the bat raised. Nancy pulled out the pepper spray, but the thing just tilted its head, curious. "You came looking for the lost boy," it said. "How sweet, how very human." "Where is he?" Nancy demanded. "Where's Eddie Flint?" The smile widened impossibly further. "Floating. Down here we all float." Its eyes fixed on 11. "Especially you, little Jane. You float between worlds already. You'd be so much happier down here with us." "Don't talk to her," Mike snapped. The thing's attention shifted to him. "Ah, the loyal one. The one who loves despite the monster she is." It took a step into the chamber. In the flashlight beams, Mike could see that its clothes were wrong. A clown costume, but faded, old, like it had been underwater for years. "Tell me, Michael Wheeler, what do you fear most?" "Nothing you can show me," Mike lied. The thing laughed again. "Oh, I doubt that. But we have time. So much time." It glanced at the others. "All of you. So much potential fear. Stephen, who's afraid of being useless. Lucas, who's afraid of choosing wrong. Dustin, who's afraid of being alone." "How does it know our names?" Dustin whispered. "It knows everything," Will had said. But Will wasn't here. Will had stayed back with Hopper because his connection to this thing was too strong, too dangerous. Nancy sprayed the pepper spray directly at the creature's face. It blinked once, slowly, then smiled wider. "That's adorable," it said. "You think pain works on me? I'm older than pain, older than fear itself. I am what fear becomes when it grows up and learns to think." Steve swung the bat. The creature moved faster than anything human could move. One moment it was standing in the tunnel entrance. The next it was across the chamber, perched on the wall like a spider. Gravity didn't seem to apply to it. "I'm not here to hurt you," it said reasonably. "Not today. Today I just want you to know me, to understand what you're facing." It dropped to the floor, landing in the water without a splash. Your friend Henry thought he was special, thought his powers made him a god, but he's just a child throwing a tantrum. I've seen real gods, eaten them, and they all tasted the same in the end. Where is Eddie? Eleven's voice was stronger now. She stepped out from behind Mike. Tell us where he is, or what? The creature glided closer. You'll hurt me? You already tried that in your little void, remember? I'm not something you can push, Jane. I'm not something you can fight. Then what are you? Mike demanded. The creature stopped. Its head tilted the other way, considering the question. I'm what comes after, it said finally. After hope. After help. After everything else fails. I'm the thing in the dark that was always there, waiting for someone to look down and see me smiling back. It gestured around the chamber. This is my place now. Your town, your fear, mine to cultivate, mine to harvest. The gates are closed, Nancy said. We'll close you out too. Oh, Nancy Drew. The creature sounded genuinely amused. I'm not in a gate. I'm not from your upside down. I'm in the spaces between spaces, in every drain, every shadow, every moment of doubt. It moved closer to her. I'm in your brother when he lies awake, wondering if his friends will leave him. I'm in your boyfriend when he remembers how it felt to fail. I'm everywhere you are, because you brought me here. We didn't, Nancy started. You tore reality apart and stitched it back wrong, the creature interrupted. You made the walls thin enough for things like me to slip through. This is your doing, Nancy Wheeler. Yours and hers. It pointed at 11. Every gate you opened, every time you broke the rules of what should be, you called to me. And I answered. 11's hands clenched into fists. Blood dripped steadily from her nose now. Mike could see the concentration on her face, the effort of trying to push against something that wouldn't be pushed. Elle, stop, he said urgently. You're hurting yourself. I can, she started. The creature moved so fast Mike barely saw it. One moment it was across the chamber. The next it was right in front of 11, its pale face inches from hers. You can't, it whispered. But that's what makes you interesting. 11's eyes rolled back. She collapsed. Mike caught her before she hit the ground. Elle, 11. We need to go. Steve grabbed Mike's arm. Now. They ran. The creature didn't follow. It just stood there in the chamber watching them flee with that too wide smile. Float away, little friends, its voice echoed after them. But you can't float far enough. I'm already everywhere you are. They burst out of the sewer access point behind the library, gasping in clean air. Hopper was waiting in his truck, the engine running. He saw 11 unconscious in Mike's arms and jumped out. What happened? It was down there, Nancy panted. It talked to us. It knows everything. Is Elle okay? Hopper took 11 from Mike, checking her pulse. She tried to fight it, Mike said. His voice was shaking. It just laughed. Hopper loaded 11 into the truck. Everyone in, now. They piled into the bed of the truck. Hopper drove fast, taking corners too quick, like he was afraid something might chase them. Mike held onto the side of the truck and looked back at the library. At the sewer entrance they'd just escaped from. For a moment he thought he saw something pale standing in the opening, something waving goodbye. Then Hopper turned a corner and it was gone. But Mike knew it didn't matter. It wasn't gone. It was never gone. It was under all of them now. In every drain and shadow, learning their fears and growing stronger with every passing moment. And they still didn't know how to fight it. Will stood at the window of the Wheeler basement, staring out at the darkening street. He hadn't gone into the sewers with the others. Hopper had forbidden it. Said Will's connection to this thing was too strong, too dangerous. Will had wanted to argue, but deep down, he'd been relieved, because Hopper was right. Every time the thing moved, Will felt it, like a thread connecting them, pulling tighter with each passing hour. It knew him, recognized him, saw something in Will that it found familiar. The other boy who'd been taken. The other boy who'd come back wrong. Behind him, the basement door opened. Will turned to see Mike helping 11 down the stairs. She was awake now, but barely. Her skin looked translucent, like paper held up to light. Mike's face was set in that expression Will knew too well. Determination mixed with barely controlled panic. "How is she?" Will asked. "Tired," Mike said. "Really tired." They settled 11 on the couch. She curled up immediately, pulling the blanket Mike offered around her shoulders. Her eyes were distant, unfocused. The rest of the group filed in. Nancy, Steve, Lucas, Dustin, Robin. All of them looked shaken. Lucas had mud on his jeans. Dustin's glasses were fogged. Nancy's hands wouldn't stop moving, fidgeting with her notepad like she could organize the chaos into something manageable. "That thing," Steve said finally, dropping into a chair. "That was not okay. Very much not okay," Robin agreed. She sat on the floor, her back against the wall. "It knew our names, our fears, everything." "How?" Lucas demanded. "How does it know that stuff?" "It watches," 11 said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. She hadn't opened her eyes. "It's been watching us since we came back. Learning, studying. Like we're some kind of science project," Dustin muttered. Will moved away from the window, that familiar cold spreading through his chest. "It's not studying us for information. It's studying us for fun." "Fun?" Nancy repeated. She stopped fidgeting with her notepad. "You're saying this thing is playing with us?" "Yes." Will sat down on the bottom step. "That's what makes it different from the Mind Flayer, from Vecna. They wanted to destroy us. This thing wants to toy with us first." Mike's jaw tightened. "So how do we fight something that thinks we're toys?" Nobody answered. The silence stretched, broken only by the furnace humming and the distant sound of Mrs. Wheeler's television upstairs. "We can't," 11 said finally. She opened her eyes and Will saw exhaustion there that went beyond physical tiredness. "Not with power. I tried. It's like fighting water. It just moves." "Then we find another way," Mike insisted. He knelt beside the couch, taking 11's hand. "We always find another way." "Mike's right," Nancy said. She was flipping through her notepad now, reading her observations. "There has to be a weakness. Everything has a weakness." "It told us its weakness," Lucas said. Everyone looked at him. "In the sewer, remember? It said it feeds on fear, cultivates it. That means fear makes it stronger. So we just stop being afraid?" Steve's voice dripped with sarcasm. "Great plan. I'll just turn off my terror like a light switch." "Not stop being afraid," Will said slowly. The idea was forming as he spoke, pieces clicking together. "But stop feeding it what it wants. It expects us to be isolated, picked off one by one. That's how it works." Dustin sat up straighter. "So we stay together. Don't give it opportunities." "It's more than that," Will continued. He could feel the rightness of it, even if he couldn't fully articulate why. "It wants us afraid, wants us to believe it's unstoppable. But if we show it something else..." A sound from outside cut him off. Laughter, a child's laughter. Everyone froze. The sound was coming from the small basement window, the one that looked out onto the backyard. Mike moved first, grabbing a flashlight and shining it through the glass. The beam illuminated the Wheelers' empty yard. Swing set, shed. Nothing else. Then something moved at the edge of the light. A figure, small, child-sized. It stepped into the beam of the flashlight, and Will's blood turned to ice. It looked like a little boy, maybe 7 or 8. Pale skin, dark eyes, a red and white striped shirt. But the proportions were wrong. The arms hung too long. The head tilted at an angle that would break a human neck. And when it smiled, Will saw teeth that had never belonged in a child's mouth. "Hello, Will," it said in a voice that sounded like his own voice played backward. Will stumbled back from the window. "It's here." "That's not a kid," Steve said, already reaching for his bat. The thing wearing a child's face pressed itself against the window glass. Its smile widened. "I thought I'd visit," it said conversationally, "since you didn't come down to play with the others." "That wasn't very friendly, Will." "Get away from the window." Hopper's voice came from the stairs. He must have heard the commotion. He had his gun drawn, pointed at the glass. "Everyone get back," but the thing just laughed. "Bullets won't hurt me, Chief. Neither will bats or pepper spray or any of your other toys. I'm not real in the way you understand real." "Then what are you?" Nancy demanded. She'd moved protectively in front of Robin. "I'm the space between breaths," it said. "The pause before the scream. I'm what's under your bed and inside your walls, and in every shadow you pretend not to see." Its fingers pressed against the glass, leaving prints that steamed in the cold. "I'm home now. You invited me, and I'm never leaving." 11 sat up on the couch. Her nose was bleeding again, but her eyes were focused now. Determined. "Elle, don't," Mike warned. "You're too weak." "I know," 11 said, "but I have to try." She raised her hand. The thing outside tilted its head, curious. "Oh, little Jane wants to play again. How delightful." 11's hand clenched into a fist. Her face twisted with concentration. Nothing happened. The thing laughed. "See, I told you, you can't." And then it screamed. Will saw it happen. Saw the moment 11's power connected with something. Not the thing itself. Not its consciousness or its form. But the mask it was wearing. The shape it had chosen to terrify them. The child's face rippled. Distorted. For just a moment, Will saw what was underneath. Lights and colors that didn't belong in this world. A vast, hungry intelligence that had been old when Earth was young. Then the mask shattered. The thing recoiled from the window, its borrowed form dissolving like smoke. Its scream wasn't human, wasn't animal. It was the sound of something that had forgotten what pain felt like, suddenly remembering. It vanished into the darkness beyond the yard. 11 collapsed backward on the couch. Mike caught her, and this time, when he checked, her nose was bleeding heavily, but she was smiling. "Just a little. I heard it," she whispered. "You did," Will said, moving closer. "How?" "Not the real thing." 11's eyes were barely open now. "Can't hurt that. But the shape it made, the mask, that's real enough." She looked at Mike. "It's vulnerable when it takes form, when it tries to be something we can see." Hopper holstered his gun and moved to the window. He scanned the yard, but whatever had been there was gone. "Everyone okay?" They nodded, though nobody looked okay. Nancy was pale. Steve gripped his bat so hard his knuckles were white. Lucas and Dustin stood close together, flashlights pointing at every shadow. "It's wounded," Will said. He could feel it through that thread connecting them. Confusion, pain, and underneath those, something new. Something the thing hadn't felt in a very long time. fear? Good, Hopper said. He pulled the basement curtains closed. Then we know it can be heard. That's a start. But it'll come back, Robin said. Right? That didn't kill it. No, 11 agreed quietly. Just heard it, made it angry. Angry is better than confident, Nancy said. She was writing in her notepad again, her hands steady now. Angry things make mistakes. Mike helped 11 lie back down. You need to rest. Really rest this time. We all do, Hopper said. Nobody leaves this house tonight. We stay together, stay alert. In the morning, we figure out our next move. Steve looked at the covered window. You think it'll try again tonight? I don't know, Hopper admitted. But I'm not taking chances. Lucas, Dustin, you're bunking in Mike's room. Nancy, Robin, take the guest room. Steve, you're on the couch up here. I'll take the chair. What about Elle? Mike asked. She stays on this couch where I can see her, Hopper said. His tone left no room for argument. And you stay nearby, Wheeler. But not too nearby. I see those hands. Mike flushed. I wasn't. Sure you weren't. But Hopper's voice was almost kind. Almost. They settled in for the night. Hopper turned off most of the lights, leaving just the small lamp by the stairs. Will took a spot on the floor near the couch, wrapped in a sleeping bag. He could hear the others moving around upstairs. The house, settling into uneasy sleep, but Will didn't sleep. He lay there staring at the ceiling, feeling that thread connecting him to the thing outside. It was out there right now, somewhere in the dark, nursing its wound, learning, adapting, getting ready for round 2. But they'd learned something too. They'd learned it could be hurt. Not killed maybe, but hurt. And hurt things could be driven away. Hurt things could be beaten. Will closed his eyes and thought about that moment when 11's power had connected. The way the mask had shattered. The way the thing had screamed. It wasn't invincible. It wasn't unstoppable. It could bleed, and if it could bleed, they had a chance. Somewhere above him, he heard Mike whisper to 11, "We're gonna beat this thing." 11's response was too quiet to hear, but Will hoped she believed it, because they needed to believe it. Even if belief was fragile, even if the thing was learning to break belief the way it broke everything else, they had to try, because that's what they did. They fought monsters, even when the monsters fought back. Morning came, but it didn't feel like morning. Mike woke to gray light filtering through the basement windows. His neck ached from sleeping in the chair. Around him, the others were starting to stir. Steve stretched on the couch, his bat still within reach. Dustin and Lucas emerged from upstairs, looking like they'd slept about as well as Mike had, which was to say not at all. 11 was already awake. She sat on the couch with her knees pulled up, staring at nothing. Mike moved to sit beside her. "Hey," he said softly, "are you feeling better?" She didn't look at him. "But it's still out there." "I know. I heard it, but I didn't stop it." Mike took her hand. "You proved it can be hurt. That's huge, Elle. That changes everything." "Did it, though?" Mike wanted to believe his own words. But in the cold light of morning, last night's victory felt smaller. They'd wounded something ancient and vast and alien. And now it was angry. Maybe that made things worse, not better. Nancy came down the stairs with Robin. They both looked exhausted but alert. Nancy had her notepad. Of course she did. "I've been thinking," Nancy said, moving to the table where they'd left all their maps and notes. "If it's vulnerable in physical form, we need to force it into one. Make it hold a shape long enough to..." "To what?" Steve interrupted. Elle barely managed to hurt it, and that knocked her out for hours. "So we find another way," Nancy insisted. "We trap it, contain it. There has to be..." The phone rang upstairs. Everyone froze. The sound was too loud, too normal for how wrong everything felt. Mrs. Wheeler's voice drifted down. "Mike, phone!" Mike climbed the stairs. His mom handed him the receiver, her face worried. She'd noticed the overnight guests, the tension. She wasn't stupid, but she hadn't asked questions. Not yet. "Hello? Mike, it's Hopper." The chief's voice was tight. "Get everyone to the station now." "What happened?" "They found Eddie Flint." Mike's stomach dropped. "Is he alive?" "But you need to see this. All of you need to see this. The line went dead." 20 minutes later, they were crowded into Chief Powell's office. Eddie Flint sat in a chair, wrapped in a blanket. His mom stood beside him, her hand on his shoulder, like she was afraid he'd disappear if she let go. Eddie looked like he'd aged 10 years in 3 days. His skin was pale. His eyes were hollow. And when he spoke, his voice was flat, empty. "It wasn't trying to hurt me," Eddie said. He was staring at the floor. "It was just showing me things." "What things?" Nancy asked gently. "Everything." Eddie's hands clenched in the blanket. "All the ways the world could hurt me, all the people who could leave me. It showed me my mom dying, my sister drowning, my friends forgetting about me." He looked up then, and Mike saw tears on his face. "It showed me myself, old and alone, and it said that's what I'd become if I didn't stay down there with it." "Where were you?" Hopper asked. "Where did you wake up?" "The old theater, the one that's been closed for years." Eddie wiped his eyes. "I was just lying there in the lobby, like someone had carried me there and left me." 11 stepped forward. "Did it hurt you, physically?" Eddie shook his head. "No, it just talked and laughed. It laughed at everything." His voice cracked. "It said I was practice, that I wasn't ready yet, that none of us were ready." "Ready for what?" Powell demanded. "For when it gets hungry enough to really feed." Eddie pulled the blanket tighter. "It said, right now it's just playing, learning our flavors. But soon it'll be time for the real feast." The room went silent. Mrs. Flint broke first. "Are you saying my son is bait? That thing is using him as bait?" Nobody answered because they all knew it was true. Eddie wasn't taken to be consumed. He was taken to be studied, tasted, and then released as a message. "We're not safe. None of us are safe. It's toying with us." "I want to go home," Eddie whispered. "Please, can I just go home?" Hopper nodded at Mrs. Flint. "Take him. Keep him inside. Don't let him near any drains or dark places." As if that would help. As if anywhere in Hawkins was safe now. After they left, Powell turned to the group. "So what do we do? We can't evacuate the whole town. People barely believe the earthquake story as it is." "We find it," Nancy said. We figure out where it's strongest and we hit it there." "With what?" Steve asked. "Good vibes and positive thinking?" "With belief," Will said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. He stood by the window, his arms wrapped around himself. "It said something to me in the basement." Will's voice was distant. "It said it was the space between breaths, the pause before the scream. That's what it feeds on, the moment of doubt. The second where you think maybe you can't win." "So we just believe really hard and it goes away?" Lucas sounded skeptical. "Not exactly." Will turned from the window. "But Eddie's right. It's still playing, still learning. That means it's not at full strength yet. If we can hit it before it finishes establishing itself, we might have a shot," Dustin finished. "We might actually have a shot." They spent the rest of the morning planning, mapping the sewer system, identifying weak points, arguing about tactics and approaches. By noon, they had something that might generously be called a plan. It probably wouldn't work, but it was better than nothing. Mike walked home with 11 as the sun started to set. She'd been quiet all day, conserving her strength. He knew she was worried, knew she was scared that her powers wouldn't be enough. "We'll figure it out," Mike said as they reached his street. "We always do." 11 stopped walking. She was staring at something on the sidewalk, a red balloon, just lying there, deflated, innocent. Mike felt his throat tighten. "Elle, it's okay." She picked up the balloon, held it in her hands. "It's just rubber, just air. It's not the scary thing." "Then what is?" 11 looked at him. "What we give it power to be." She dropped the balloon. The wind caught it, rolling it down the street toward a storm drain. They watched it tumble along until it disappeared into the grating, and for just a moment Mike thought he heard laughter floating up from below. Soft, patient, amused. "It's still there," 11 said. "I know. It's waiting. I know." "Mike," she turned to face him fully. "What if we can't stop it?" Mike wanted to lie. Wanted to say, of course they could stop it. They'd stopped everything else. Demogorgons, mind flayers, Vecna. But the truth was he didn't know. This thing was different. This thing was patient and vast, and it thought in time scales humans couldn't comprehend. It would wait years if it had to. Decades. It would outlast them all. Then we slow it down, Mike said finally. We hurt it enough that it leaves Hawkins alone. We make it not worth the effort. 11 considered this. Then she took his hand. "Okay," she said, "we try." They walked the rest of the way in silence. That night, Will couldn't sleep again. He sat at his desk, drawing. His hand moved across the paper almost on its own, sketching shapes and shadows. When he finished, he looked at what he'd drawn. A face, pale and smiling. But the eyes were wrong. They weren't looking at the viewer. They were looking through them, past them, at something further away. Will picked up a red marker and wrote beneath the drawing, "Friends vs. Fear." It was supposed to be hopeful. A reminder that they had each other. That together they were stronger. But as Will stared at the words, they seemed to shift, rearrange themselves in his mind. Fear vs. friends. That's how it saw them. Not as warriors, not as heroes, just as friends. Small and fragile and so easy to break. Will put down the marker and turned off his desk lamp. Outside his window, Hawkins slept. Families in houses. Children in beds. All of them unaware that beneath their feet, in the pipes and drains and forgotten spaces, something older than nightmares was making itself at home. Will pulled his covers up and closed his eyes. Tomorrow they would plan. Tomorrow they would fight. But tonight, in the dark, Will felt that thread connecting him to the thing. Felt its presence, like a weight on his chest. And he knew with absolute certainty. They'd hurt it, they'd scared it, they'd proven it could bleed. But they hadn't won. Not yet, maybe not ever. Because the thing in the sewers was patient. It was vast, it was ancient, and it was still here, still watching, still learning, still smiling. Somewhere in the network of tunnels beneath Hawkins, water dripped in the darkness. A red balloon floated past, carried by the current. And in the shadows, something laughed very softly. Not a threat, just a promise. We'll play again soon. All of us, down here we all float, and some of us never come back up.